right. Good evening and welcome to Thursday Therapy with the Counseling Couple. I am Carlos Bing and this is my lovely wife, Seneca Bing. And we are here to work on the Thursday Therapy conversation for the month of April. If you're joining us for the first time, this is a forum or opportunity for us to have a conversation making mental health a priority. So we're always glad to have this opportunity. So it is the month of April. It's springtime. We're super excited. I think it's going to be 80 degrees here in Columbus on Saturday. Can't wait. Um, and so we always like to mention as we begin this conversation and bring awareness to important topics on the mental health awareness calendar. The purpose is to make sure that we are continuing to make our mental health a priority and getting help in the area where we need it. So here's what's in line for the month of April. April is Alcohol Awareness Month. It is National Autism Awareness Month. It is National Child Abuse Awareness Month. It is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. It's National Counseling Awareness Month. It's also National Minority Health Month. And finally, it's Stress Awareness Month, which is important because that's what we're going to be talking about here in a moment. In terms of last month, we came together and had a conversation for parents to better support their students. And if you were joining us for the month of March, Seneca and I spoke with Farida Shahid and Jathia Abdullah Simmons about cybersecurity safety. And so if you didn't get a chance to watch our podcast from last month, that's available online. And you can check that out there. But today, we're going to talk about stress. And so the topic for this month is really dealing with that word stress. And so this evening, we're going to speak with Chelsea Elliott, who is the CEO of Somacom Lab and the founder and creator of the EQ Kids Crew card game that we're going to hear about a little bit later. But before we go there, before we introduce Chelsea, I always have a story. And so today, I want to share this story before we go into the introductions. And the story is really about this. Many of you know that I'm a licensed professional counselor. And when I started in this work 7 or 8 years ago, I remember spending a lot of time dealing with clients in the space of anger management. And by the time they got with me, they would always say things like, I don't need this anger management work. I don't understand what you're going to be able to work with me on. And by about the second or third session together, we would have 8 of them. But by the second or third session, they would be in a place of being able to honestly say, like, some of the things that we talked about have really helped them to work through their anger and through their emotion control. I always tell folks we can't control what happens, but we can control how we react to it. And so a lot of that work was really spent on helping folks to understand that. And so we're going to get an opportunity today to dive into that very topic a little bit more. So I'm going to pass it to my lovely wife so she can introduce our co-presenter for the evening.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. One of the things, if I can add on to what Carlos was saying, that I always think about being in the high school or the school setting, period. We need to have better ways to help students to cope and to deal with what their emotions. So as a school counselor, of course, I spent a great deal of my time doing that, right? When a student is put out of class, where do they go? Either to the counselor's office or to the principal's office. And we're often trying to help students to regulate and to think about their reaction to things that are happening. And so I'm so excited to have Chelsea with us tonight because she created a game for younger children. Because I also know when we get to high school, some of those ways are set in. So it's really good to start talking to children at a younger age about their emotions and how they regulate those. So I am so happy and honored to have Chelsea with us. I met her through the Central Ohio Parent Leadership Training Institute. And so I got to hear awesome things about her program there. And so I just want to pause and let Chelsea just kind of welcome Chelsea and to introduce herself and kind of your work with self-regulation. So welcome, Chelsea.
Hi, thank you both for letting me speak and be here with you all today. So my name is Chelsea Elliott, and I am a parent leader. I'm a wife, a mom. I have 2 little kids, 19 months and 5 years old, little girls. And I'm somebody who struggled with my mental health a lot when I was a child, just from different situations that I've been through, different traumas that I went through, and a lack of mental and emotional support through all of that. And so now that I'm an adult and I understand mental health more, I have a master's in macro social work and created Somocom Lab to support families, children, educators, just be there for children so that they can understand that their emotions are normal and that they're healthy and that they are things that they should have and should feel, and just to normalize the conversation around that to prevent, a lot of the things that I went through unnecessarily because of my emotional situations. So thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. And so you mentioned macro social work. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so I had no clue what it was either when I went to my degree program, but I went to Boston College and my degree is more in social innovation. And macro is really just like the administrative side of social work. So I'm not a clinician, I'm not a practicing licensed social worker, but I am a social worker. I do have a social work background. That's my education is in, but I'm not a practicing clinician. So I created this company based off of, just the work that I've done, the research that I've done, and things that I've been through with kids in my education.
Awesome. Perfect. I love it. I just heard you say that, and I wanted to make sure
I
that
know.
we ask the question as we are going
Yeah.
along. So, one of the things that we're going to do tonight, a little bit different, is it's going to be more of a flow conversation. Now, we know that you have some slides, and so you'll go through that, but we will just ask questions along the way. So anyone in the viewing audience has any questions, as always, please feel free to put them in the chat. But if you don't have any questions, we will, so that we can definitely just kind of help to learn more, right? It's all about learning more. So I will go ahead and ask for your slides to come up, and then we'll just turn it over to you, Chelsea.
All right, thank you. And the only reason I have slides is to keep myself on track because I have ADHD and I could talk about all of this all day, every day, and don't want to go off on too many tangents. So, so we're going to talk about self-regulation and the importance of modeling self-regulation and healthy behaviors. So, through the slides and through this presentation, this conversation that we're having, we're going to learn about what self-regulation is, why self-regulation is important, and what makes it so hard. Because, we're here because it is difficult. It is hard. It can be very difficult sometimes to self-regulate. And then what strategies you all can use. So, I often hear from parents because I'm in a lot of different parenting organizations and groups, and I have a lot of parents who are friends and some, people that I'm coaching. And they're always talking about how desperate they are to change their children's behavior. They always say things like, oh, my daughter's really timid and doesn't stand up for herself, or my son shuts down whenever he's upset. And, when they get mad, they're slamming things and they're throwing things down. And my very first question is always the same to every person, every parent. How do you react in those same situations? How do you handle conflict? How do you, respond when you're upset? And typically what I hear 9 out of 10 times is that the parent does the same thing that their child does. And they don't realize it until they start talking about it. They don't, they're like, oh, well, I shut down because I don't really like conflict. Well, your child's not going to know how to handle conflict, so they're going to shut down too, right? So, this is something that's really important to me because kids are like a mirror for us sometimes. They're like a reflection of our unfiltered emotions and behaviors. And I know I see it in my family. My 5-year-old is just like me. She hates to lose. She always has to be right. She knows everything. So, it's very important for us to teach our kids what healthy responses look like, how to handle our emotions, and, just how to respond in the real world to different situations. So what is self-regulation? Basically, self-regulation is the ability to manage your reactions and responses to emotional situations. So, for example, you use self-regulation when your child is screaming at the top of their lungs, but you are able to stay calm. You might do some deep breathing or, reminding yourself like, okay, this day is going to be over at some point. So just, keeping yourself calm in that situation. Or if somebody cuts you off on the road, that's a big one. Driving with somebody, you can really get an understanding for who that person is and their level of patience. So if somebody cuts you off on the highway and you don't chase after them or scream and shout and raise your blood pressure, getting upset. And also if you're feeling overwhelmed at work, but you take a deep breath and you tackle one task at a time. So those are different situations where, you can easily identify, oh yeah, I do practice self-regulation in those challenging moments. Why is self-regulation so important? Well, it's a skill that you'll use throughout your entire life. It's, in school, they call it social emotional learning. And in the workplace, they call it soft skills, even though there's nothing soft about personable, interpersonal skills. But understanding and managing emotions helps us to build healthy relationships, trust our gut, understand ourselves, understand other people better, empathize, show compassion. So having self-regulation just keeps us in a steady, calm, centered state within ourselves. We experience around 400 emotions in a day, every day. That's a lot. I can think of sometimes where I'm feeling two emotions at the same time. So, if you think about it, you might be able to identify a majority of those emotions that you're feeling throughout your day. They can range from enjoyable emotions like joy and excitement and happiness to less enjoyable emotions like grief, frustration, or sadness. But kids also experience this range of emotions, but with a lot less brain development than what we have as adults. So it's important for them to have self-regulation tools early so they become the default response instead of the alternatives like hitting, screaming, slamming doors, storming off, throwing things. Recently heard about a student that was upset about not getting a pencil from their teacher because there's a pencil shortage, apparently. And the student threw a table through a desk at the teacher because they were mad. So, teaching them how to handle stressful situations, I'm sure there's more to that story for that student, but in that moment, that's what it looked like. They don't know how to handle themselves. So my goal is to help us to understand what's going on with the child or what's going on with ourselves and what's happened to them that makes people feel like they need to explode instead of focusing on that behavior when, in the classroom or at home, because then the behavior becomes the focus and the issue doesn't get resolved. The underlying issue doesn't get resolved. Self-regulation can also teach us to trust our gut, like I said before, because we don't have to fear feeling uneasy or not knowing what those feelings are. A lot of times we teach kids, oh, you're fine. Oh, that wasn't that bad. Oh, just ignore it. And as they get older, they put those into practice and they stop trusting their gut instinct because our gut is like our second brain. It tells us things sometimes before our mind tells us or before it clicks, before it catches on. And so it's just really important for us to be able to trust our gut. A lot of times, I have anxiety and depression. Like I said, I'm totally fine with talking about my mental health and my journey and where I've been, but I have anxiety and depression, and both of them manifest in my gut first. I can usually feel something uneasy in my stomach before I feel it in my mind. So with my anxiety, it feels more like a fullness and then a tightness throughout the day. And with depression, it's more of a dull ache. So being able to, understand the physical feelings and it is very important with being able to self-regulate. As a parent, it's important that we trust our gut and allow our children to trust theirs as well by validating their feelings and teaching them how to work through them without judgment or fixating on their behaviors, like I said before. Because when we focus more on the behavior, we don't get to the root of what caused that behavior, and they're unable to work through that in the future. Because then they're just focused on not misbehaving. Yes.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. I'm done. I'm done with that part.
Oh, okay. No,
I'm
I
sorry.
did
I
have
wasn't done with that part. If you wanted to just ask a question.
Yes, we do we did want to ask a quick question because you are very open about the fact that you had some challenges early on with your mental health and even now. And so, and you've shared a little bit about those experiences. How did you find help, right? When you were young, what were some of the resources? And now that you are grown, some of the resources, because you talked a lot about trusting your children's gut. And so, how can parents do that?
Yeah. So to hopefully quickly share this story, I I grew up in California. My grandfather got sick. So I have three sisters. My mom flew out first. He luckily lived for 21 years after the procedure that he had because it was very, very, very They weren't expecting him to make it at all. And then after he made it, they were like, yeah, he's probably not going to be here too long. But 21 years, right? So we came to Ohio to take care of him, left my dad behind. So left a parent behind that we had lived with, growing up forever, and moved to take care of a sick grandparent in Ohio. Didn't know anybody but our grandparents really. And then we experienced snow, and then it turned into new schools and just a lot of things happening around us on our behalf. I get now as an adult, but in the moment, it's like, what's happening? What am I, what's going on? I'm grieving losing my parent that I had to leave behind, and grieving the life that I had to leave behind. And now I have this new thing. And there's so many things, so many different things going on, so many promises that were broken. And it just, you just feel like you're so out of control. And kids feel that. They do need to be in control of something, or they're going to find some way to be in control of something. And so I had eating disorders. I had suicidal ideation, cutting behaviors, self-harm. It was bad. And it's not just my family that didn't know what to do. It was the school system. I stayed in the nurse's office on a regular basis, and she never told anybody. The counselors didn't do much. I lost my father when I was in high school, and I only saw him once after we had left. So I was 9 when we left California. I saw him once before he passed. And, I'm still in school and doing things that I need to do, and, taking tests and trying to work through so many things as my insides are being torn up by all the stress and the sadness and the loss and the, absence, and just so many things happening. And so as an adult, I'm so grateful that I'm still here, because I shouldn't still be here. All the things that I've been through and done, and it's by God's grace that I'm still here. And now I know why. So,
Right.
I try to share with adults, it's okay to let your kids have control over some aspect of their lives. It's okay for them to express how they're feeling, even if that goes against how you're feeling. It's not them being disrespectful. It's them expressing themselves. And if we want them, a lot of people are like, oh, you're 18, you're an adult, go out and be this amazing person in the world. They didn't get a chance to practice any of that when they were younger. They didn't get a chance to stand up for themselves. So they're not going to be good at it when they go to work. They didn't get a chance to see healthy conflict growing up. So they're not going to be good at that when they're in relationships. So anytime they get into it with somebody, they get into it with somebody. It becomes a fight. It's, oh, we're no longer friends. I'm done with this person, the whole no new friends and all that stuff. Like, it's just toxic behavior. And so to prevent that, allowing kids to be their own person when they're younger builds them up in that foundation that they need to continue that as they become an adult. Because we're not just raising kids, we're raising humans who are they're going to get older. They're going to be the ones taking care of us eventually. And we want them to be healthy and sane when they're doing that. So I hope that answered your
Absolutely.
question.
You brought up one good point. Yes, it did. It's amazing. And you brought up one point, and a coworker sent me a message that said, you never know how annoying you are until you have someone that behaves just like you. And so now that I think about, we tell our kids, ask questions and be curious. But then when they start asking us questions, we're like, why are you asking me questions? I don't want you to ask me questions. So again,
Yes.
you brought up a lot of great points in that. So thank you.
Yeah, Chelsea,
Absolutely.
and I'm thinking about, one of my clients, I have a client who's probably 16 years old, and mom and boyfriend were together in the house. Mom and boyfriend broke up. Mom's
Mhm.
past relationships were when mom and boyfriend broke up before, it was a fist fight. So in his mind, the only way people break up is through a fight. In this
Yes.
situation, dad or boyfriend left, but there wasn't a fight. And so my client was like, "Oh, y'all didn't break up. That's y'all still cool. Y'all, when's he coming back over to the house?" Because in his mind, he was conditioned to believe that a breakup means this, and they had
Yeah.
never communicated about that. So some of the things you said resonated with me as I thought about some of my clients, and how when we don't address those things, when we don't give them a playing field to practice in,
Yeah.
they're left with whatever they believe to be the case. And to your
Yes.
point, we're raising humans. So eventually these children are going to go out into the world and believe whatever's in their head. And so we got to give them a sandbox. So I appreciate the
Yeah.
comments you shared.
Absolutely. And I remember blaming myself for my father's death, and we never talked about it. I'm like, I'm a child. As an adult now, I'm like, I am a kid, and I blame myself for that. Like, because we didn't talk. And I just, you kids will always, they always know something is up. You don't have to go into detail with everything, but they always know something is up, and they will find a way to blame themselves for it and then beat themselves up for it. So not giving any information is not protecting your kids, because you don't feel like talking about it. It's not protecting kids. So that, whew, yes.
Yeah. Often if you don't feel like talking about it, they will talk about it with someone,
Yeah.
and the messages become unclear and blurry at that point. So it is important to talk. And one other point that I really love that you brought up is that people are so quick to not be friends, or as soon as we get mad at each other, we just have to cut everything off and we can't talk ever again.
Everybody
and that's not healthy either. As we talked about, as Chelsea said, she's a parent leader. So our parent leaders in Central Ohio Parent Leadership Training Institute, there's a lot of civil discourse that happens in there. And it is for the purpose that you said, so that there's a sandbox so that you can disagree with people, but stay a community, right? You may not love everybody. You may not want to be friends, but you may disagree and have to agree to disagree. And so I really hope that we can start to provide those opportunities for young people, because if they don't have healthy ways to deal, and even adults, it's a lot of adults that behave that way. But we just need some healthy ways to do that. So sorry, we interrupted your your presentation.
No, that's okay. This is good. This is good. Okay, so we can go to the next one. So, what makes self-regulation so hard? Well, we talked about a lot of this just now, but just going a little further into detail, it's not easy. It's not always easy to, I'm not saying bottle up your emotions, but to just control them, to have control over them. We all experience emotions differently for numerous reasons, including childhood trauma, how we saw emotions growing up, like we were just talking about, at home and in the community, like in church, in school, and in sports, and what we understand about emotions in general. We become triggered by our children's behaviors and allow our biases from past experiences to shape our responses and reactions. So thinking about things that really irritate you about things that are normally developing behaviors in kids can really trigger you into, trying to shut them down, or making you so upset that you start lashing out yourself. So those are things that can make it hard. The last 2 to 3 years has been, insanely challenging, very, very challenging. Just multiple things back to back to back, leaving many people jobless and homeless, and just fighting and protests and elections, so many things back to back that have happened. People that have been losing family members left and right due to chronic illness or because of COVID, just different things, and the inability to regroup and reset. Like, I'm in therapy right now because I just needed help with the regrouping, because it's like back to back to back to back nonstop, just in the world and just in life in general. So those things can make it really difficult. There's also a concept that, Carlos, you mentioned a minute ago, called conditioned reactions, which means that we, adults and kids alike, are conditioned by our biggest influences, usually parents or trusted family relatives, educators, people that are close-knit to you, to respond to certain situations in certain ways. So I'm going to use my 19-month-old as an example. So, when babies, they fall down, and as soon as they fall, they look at you, and you can either, you can react in two ways. One, you can go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you fell. Are you okay? Oh, my poor baby." And the first thing they're going to do is boohoo bawl. They are going to cry. They're going to freak out. They're going to panic because you freaked out and panicked. Or what I do now, I look at her and go, "Uh-oh, you fell, but you caught yourself. Good job." And she gets right up and is like, "Yay." And she walks away and it's totally fine. So the conditioning in that response is, every time you fall, it's not the end of the world. It's not doom and gloom. You're okay. And if you're not okay, then you're going to cry regardless of somebody else's reaction. But you don't have to freak out every single time you fall. So that's just one quick example of that. And if your child, if you notice that they're prone to lying or hiding, being short with their responses, things like that, it can be a sign that they've been conditioned previously. It may not be, from the parent. It could just be in any setting, but they've been conditioned with reactions of anxiety, worry, anger, sadness, fear, things that might be uncomfortable for them, or they see that they're making somebody else uncomfortable and they don't want to do that. So they're going to generally hide sometimes. Another example of this that can be relatable is if your boss says, "We need to talk." That's like one of the worst phrases somebody could say, right? One of the scariest things that you can hear. A lot of people, including myself, start going through, like if you hear that at work, you go through a whirlwind of emotions and down a rabbit hole of like, well, did I mess this up? What was the last email I sent? Did I do something wrong? And then you start thinking that you're going to be fired. And usually 9 times out of 10, it's nothing that serious at all. That's been my experience. If, your spouse says, "Oh, we need to talk," it can draw up so much anxiety because it's usually not said in positive situations. And, you just start freaking out and panicking. So that's something else that can make it very difficult. Another thing, you or your child may have experienced traumas in childhood called adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. They're referred to as ACEs, ACES, that impact our physical development and our ability to manage our emotions. So ACEs can be categorized in 3 different ways. Abuse, which can be sexual, emotional, or physical abuse, physical or emotional neglect, and household dysfunction like violence, abuse, divorce, addiction, and incarceration. So different situations that happen in a household. And research has shown that people with 4 or more ACEs, so people who've experienced 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, are more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, attempt suicide, and have learning or behavioral problems. So ACEs can be a really detrimental thing to our mental health if it's not addressed. So like we were talking about a minute ago, when we don't talk to our kids about the things that they see us going through or that they have been through, it doesn't go away for them. Just because we don't want to think about it or we're ignoring it doesn't mean that they're not. And so like Seneca said, they're going to talk to somebody, and it should be, a trusted person in their lives. It should be their parent or the person that they went through this experience with, so that they can get a better view and understanding of it and work through those emotions. So what does all this have to do with self-regulation? So our childhood experience have a profound impact on how we handle situations throughout our lives. When we're regulating our emotions, we're in control of our mind, our body, and our actions in emotionally challenging situations. And our kids benefit a lot from being able to see us in those emotional experiences and practicing positive, healthy, and things that we're doing for ourselves, just positive and healthy self-regulation strategies that they can use themselves. So we're less likely to fly off the handle when we're triggered by their behaviors, and our kids are less likely to throw tantrums and have emotional outbursts when they're able to self-regulate. But understanding what can make it so hard to do that can help us have a holistic view around ourselves and our own beliefs and biases around emotions and the things that trigger us into that knee-jerk reaction that we usually end up regretting later on, or that impact other people in a negative way. So it's something that's really, it's earned at the earliest stages of life, but it's important to just start. So if you have teenagers now and you feel like, man, I should have been doing a better job, just start now. Just start showing them different ways to self-regulate now. If you have little tiny itty bitty babies, you can teach them things now. My 19-month-old, I think when she turned 12 months, she started letting us know how she, that she was upset by crossing her arms like this. And she goes, And that's how she lets us know that she's mad. She's very emotionally expressive without saying a word. So those are just some things that can make it a little difficult just to understand yourselves a little better. We can go to the next one. So what are some strategies that we can use to self-regulate? There are a ton of different things that you can do. As I was making this list, I was like, oh, I could add more, but I couldn't because the list is already long. And I don't want to overwhelm people who are new to this kind of stuff, or, people that might think, oh my gosh, this is so much, I can't do these. So just pick one that you think would be fun for you or something that you can do yourself, something you can do with your kids, just so you can show them what it looks like. So one tip that I have for sure is to practice these things before you need them. So if you are upset in a moment, you don't want to go looking for, a PowerPoint to figure out or watch a video and say, oh my gosh, how do I self-regulate in this moment? No, you want to practice these things before you need them so that you already have that in your toolbox. And the same goes for your kids. So expanding your emotional vocabulary, that's something that is super helpful. When you understand how you're feeling and what you're feeling and even why you're feeling it, you're more likely to be able to bring yourself back to center, calming yourself down a lot quicker. And you're able to reduce the likelihood of you throwing a tantrum or having an emotional outburst yourself. One thing that you can do for kids, if it's okay, I want to show some of my stuff. Is that okay?
Yes, I was getting ready to ask you because I have them here.
Oh, yay. So I have this amazing little comfort bag. And it actually, the card game comes in the bag, but you can take the game out of the bag and kids can put whatever their favorite comfort items are in it. So like I have fidget spinners and my daughter has like a tablet, it can fit in the bag, some headphones. If they have like a small blanket that can go in here, a glitter jar. I love having glitter jars. We have them all over the house. They're like my favorite thing. Just different tools that kids can use to self-regulate for themselves. So giving them the bag and saying, hey, put your favorite stuff in there, and they can take it with them when they're traveling, or they can carry it around the house with them just so that they have it with them for when they need it. And they have all their favorite things in it. For expanding your vocabulary, I have this card game. It's called the EQ Kids Crew, and it teaches kids about, this one has 48 emotions. And so all the cards have little characters on them that are showing kids what the emotions look like. And then they have more in-depth words and a definition and some activities so they can get a better understanding of what that emotion looks like. And then some similar words that they can use for that same word. So just being able to expand your vocabulary is so helpful. So a lot of times kids will act out because they don't know what else to do. But if they can say, I'm feeling frustrated right now, that's much easier. It's going to be easier for them to resolve that issue and easier for you to understand what's going on with them than if they're just kicking their feet, throwing things around, and you're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? What's going on? So yes, expanding your emotional vocabulary is very important. The second one is, go ahead.
So when you talk about the emotional vocabulary, can you talk about how many emotions are there? Because people are only used to certain emotions, but you just talked about 48 of them. So
yeah, we have isn't there 20,000 emotions? 20,000 emotions in total that we could feel at any given time. So the game that I have just has the most that I have is 130. And most people know about 3, feeling happy, feeling mad, and feeling sad. And a lot of times they're like, oh no, I can't feel sad or mad. Those are forbidden emotions. So all they think about is, I need to be happy. I need to be happy. My kids need to be happy at all times. And that's just not true.
Right. And I wanted to bring that up because Chelsea actually created this game. So she doesn't just have the game. She created the game. And so it is very much needed and helpful for people who really are struggling with trying to think of, what do I say to my child, or how do I help them if they're sad or mad or angry, whatever the case may be. And it also can help us to expand our vocabulary around these emotions, because there are a lot of adults that don't know how to articulate how they're feeling. They just know they feel it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of times you're physically, no, it's okay. I appreciate that very much. I'm not good at tooting my own horn, but I did create this, and it was out of, necessity during the pandemic and wanting to support my oldest daughter more. So she was 3 when the pandemic started, and I started to notice that she would act out at certain times. And I'm like, why is she doing, she knows she's not supposed to do this. Why is she doing this right now? So I would just watch her, and I'm like, okay, well, let's go to a different room. Let's talk about this. Let me give her some words to use for this. And that changed her so much, not in a bad way, but it enhanced her ability to communicate and to share how she was feeling. She was already really good at understanding how I was feeling, but for herself, she wasn't able to really articulate that. So being able to do that with this card game and the books that I wrote for her, like it just completely changed things for us in our house, being at home, 24/7 together. Because I know a lot of people really struggle with that. This has not been easy. That's not been easy, but it's been so cool to hear her, say that she understands the difference between feeling frustrated and feeling upset. And I'm just like, okay, girl, like that's awesome. But she's feeling it at that moment. So I try not to get too excited because she's mad for real. But, just being excited about that. So expanding their vocabulary is super helpful, super important. And yes, I love my card game. I'm biased, but I love my card game. It's been really helpful. Really, really helpful. Yes. Thank you. So next up are some grounding techniques. Grounding techniques are things that, so I don't know, like we're on a scale, and if we get too far into one emotion, we tip over this way. We get too far into the other, we tip over this way. So grounding kind of brings us back to center. It brings us in alignment with our normal state of being. And so things like yoga, being able to stretch out and do some yoga and really be in tune with your body, that's really helpful. And then mindfulness practices are super helpful. And I know a lot of people hear mindfulness and they think, oh, you have to be like a monk and you have to go sit in silence somewhere. And you don't at all. You can do mindfulness anywhere at any time. The very first time I did it, I learned about it through like eating a piece of chocolate and just being present in that moment with that piece of chocolate. And that was it. Like mindfulness is just about being present in the moment. So if you're prone to anxiety and worry, mindfulness, you can think more about, okay, right now in this very moment, this is what I'm feeling. This is where I am. This is how my body feels. This is the tension I'm feeling and where I'm feeling it. So you can start to relax those areas. Just closing your eyes and doing a body scan and giving yourself the present moment is so important and so helpful. So that's one really easy way. No matter what's going on around you, you can always practice mindfulness, and you can just do it for 5 seconds. You can do it for, 3 hours if you want to, but just giving yourself that moment to be present with yourself and for yourself will bring you back grounded. Mantras and affirmations are really big for me. They're really big around our house. So we have different phrases because, like I said, my daughter's a lot like me. She doesn't like to lose. She does, there's just certain things about her that I'm like, oh, that's so me, just an unfiltered version of me. And so helping her work through those things has helped me work through them. So like in our books, this one's called Natalie the Monster Slayer. And this book has a mantra in it that says, I can do it. I can do it. I am brave and strong. And it's something that Natalie would say. So if she's feeling afraid of something, she would say that mantra to herself. And I remember hearing her say it. She was riding her bike outside and there was a little hill on the sidewalk, and I was about to go get her. And I'm like, oh, well, let me just see how she does. And I heard her whisper it to herself. I can do it. I can do it. I'm brave and strong. And it was just the most precious thing I had ever heard. But she got over that little hill all by herself and she wasn't as scared. She was still scared, but she did it. And so having those little reminders, practicing those things, reading books and, reminding yourself of those things when you're not in that moment so you can use them in the moment is really helpful. And the other book that I have for her called Natalie's Not So Fun Playdate, the other mantra is, I'm okay, I am calm. Or I'm calm, I am okay. I'm calm, I am okay. And just something you could write to yourself or recite to yourself just to bring yourself back. I'm calm, I am okay. So affirmations are kind of future statements that help you to, just tell yourself positive things for the future. Journaling is something else that's really helpful. Writing and journaling, gratitude journaling saved my life for sure. I learned about it from Oprah, just writing down a few things that you're grateful for every day. And those things start to come to you more. You start to notice them more. So I started being grateful for having, 5 fingers on one hand, because some days it was just that rough. Other days I'm grateful for the blue sky and how fluffy the clouds look, just writing down the little things. And then you'll start to recognize more and more things to be grateful for every day and be excited to write in your journal and just have those at the forefront of your mind. And also writing down a stream of consciousness. So just getting all of your thoughts out. I'm faster at typing than writing. And so I'm always just like, getting all those things out of your mind, out of your body, out of your system so that you can think clearer and clear your mind. That's really helpful with self-regulating. Developing a growth mindset. So adding the word yet to the end of statements that You're feeling kind of stressed and you're like, oh, I can't do this. I can't do this. You can't do this yet. So that means you're going to do this. This is something that's really helpful for kids too. Again, my child, she does this all the time. If I'm saying something, she's like, yet, Mom, you can't do it yet. I'm like, oh yeah, thanks. Okay. So just adding that to the end of a statement, it focuses on your strengths and not so much on what you can't do, but what you can do and how you can get to where you want to be without being so frustrated and down on yourself. 3 questions. So whenever I get upset, I ask myself 3 questions before I open my mouth because I used to be a fly off the handle kind of person. But after I have my kids, I'm really focused on making sure that I'm taking care of their mental health. So I have to take care of mine. So the 3 questions that I ask myself, if my daughter spilled a cup of water the other day, my computer was on the table and I'm like, oh my gosh, I stop myself, ask myself 3 questions. How is my reaction helping her? How is my reaction helping me? And how is my reaction helping the situation? So if I scream and shout and ask her, oh my God, what is wrong with you? I can't believe you did that. Is that going to help her in the moment? Probably not. If I say, oh, that's okay. We all make mistakes. Let's grab some paper towels and clean it up. That's going to help her more and going to help myself more as well in that moment. So, how is it helping her? How is it helping me? If I scream, yes, it might feel good in the moment for me to scream, but I'm going to feel like garbage later for doing that. I'm going to feel really mad at myself for going off and it's not going to be helpful. And how is it helping the situation? If I scream and go off, is it going to prolong the situation? Kids will usually mirror what we're doing. So if I'm screaming and shouting, they're probably going to scream and shout. Tears will be flowing. Go to your room. That's just going to make things even worse. And so asking yourself those 3 questions in the moment, how is this helping them? How is this helping me? And how is this helping the situation? It sounds like it'll take a long time, but it really doesn't, especially once it becomes like a part of your norm. It just becomes a really quick thing like, oh, let me stop and process how I'm going to respond before I do anything. And that also helps with the growth mindset. So my daughter was very encouraged because she knew she wasn't going to get in trouble because of what happened. So she was more excited to clean it up herself than anything else. So getting silly. So if you just feel like really down or you're feeling really upset and really frustrated and things are just not getting any better, get silly, make some jokes. Dad jokes are always really fun. Moms can make dad jokes too, just really bad jokes. I suck at making jokes, but my daughter loves them. She's very honest and brutal about my joking, but whatever. We just get silly around here. And then making things fun. So, if you have a hard time with a bedtime routine or you have a hard time getting your kids to do something that you've been asking them to do, try to make it fun. So I brush my teeth with my oldest because she gets bored with it. And I'm like, yeah, it's a boring thing to do. So let's make it fun. So we're like dancing and singing and, doing whatever, just making silly faces or practicing different emotions while we're brushing our teeth. That's one of her favorite things to do. So just making things fun when they become difficult. Applying some pressure. So let's practice this together. Putting pressure on different parts of your body can help you regulate. It helps me a lot, especially when I'm anxious. If somebody puts their hand on my heart or just, squeezing my arm or squeezing my hand, that really helps a ton. So push your hands together, put them together like this, and then push them together as hard as you can. And then let them go. And that I don't know, it puts some pressure in a part of your body and then it lets it go. So it's like all of your anger and frustration is in this one space. You have control over it and then you can release it. So just doing things like that, you can push your feet a little harder on the floor or on a wall, but putting pressure really helps. Saying how you feel out loud, just expressing your feelings out loud can help to remove them, can help to bring them to the forefront so you can deal with them. And it also, lets others know what's going on with you so that you can express your needs to them or they can ask, is there something I can do to help you instead of you just assuming that people get it without you saying anything. And it also shows your kids what that feeling might look like. So, if you're stomping around, they ask, hey, what's wrong? And you say nothing, they know something is wrong, but you're not helping them understand what that looks like. So it helps with a lot of different things. Taking some deep breaths. That is always very helpful. We don't realize how shallow our breathing is until we start focusing on our breathing. So it's really important to just breathe in and breathe out through your mouth. Breathe in, make sure that you're breathing in through your stomach. I know a lot of times we're afraid of our stomachs poking out or us looking fat. so we don't get a good deep breath in through our belly. Like we don't do good belly breathing, but that's really important for our blood flow and our overall functioning of our body. So another thing you can do is box breathing. So that's a simple way to practice box breathing is to breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, and breathe out for 4. You can do different number sequences depending on how you're feeling or what you want to practice, but that's something that's really easy to do. And then if you're really stressed, blowing out a candle. So pretending your finger is a candle, taking a deep breath in, and then blowing out through your mouth, like pursing your lips. So that helps with stress. Reframing your mindset. So not in a toxic, positive way, like, oh, don't, somebody else has it worse than you and your life is perfect because no, things happen to everybody. Life can suck sometimes and that's okay. But being able to reframe your mindset so that you're not always looking at the negative of situations and you can find some sort of positive in what you're going through or, just in your life in general is a really good practice. And then practicing self-care, self-love, and boundaries. So self-care can be anything. I always tell people, if you don't know where to start, step outside your door, breathe the fresh air in for 30 seconds and go back in your house. That is self-care. That counts. I call it a fancy shower. I have a nightlight in the bathroom. I turn the lights off. I had what's it called, like a little bath bomb in there. Or a shower bomb, whatever it's called. And, just breathing in that essential oil and pretending that it's a candlelight and that you're just in this real fancy spa, but it's really just your shower and it's totally fine. And listening to like mindfulness music and stuff. So those are just very simple self-care practices that you can do for yourself. Practicing self-love and showing your kids what it looks like to love on yourself is really important so that they can learn to do that. And then setting boundaries. I taught my kids about privacy because I don't like to be bothered in the bathroom. So privacy, please. And they leave me alone. My daughter also says, oh, privacy, please. And I leave her alone. I don't make them hug people. I don't like to hug people, if I don't want to, if I'm not in the mood. So I don't force them to do that either, because that leads to issues outside of just that moment. And so, these are just simple ways it's still about self-regulation because it's like preventative. It's preventative. So you're supporting yourself before you get to those moments where you need to self-regulate. And because you're already in a healthier mind state, you're better able to practice those self-regulation techniques. So those are just some of the things. Like I said, I could talk about this literally all day. So I'm just going to stop right there and we can just have more of a conversation.
Well, Chelsea, I will say this. I mean, with the number of clients that I've worked with, I always tell them that when we think about strategies, it's really a guessing game in terms of what's going to work for that individual. And so like with everything you listed, you started off by saying, I could have added a bunch more to this list, but I don't want to overwhelm folks. And I think it's important for our listeners to understand that like that list, one, it's not all encompassing, but if you don't at least try something,
yes,
then you don't know, you just won't know. So, I always encourage folks, try something that's on the list. Try the deep breathing. Try the gratitude journals, try something and see what it does for you. And then let's talk about it. I do have some clients that just get to a place where they refuse to try. And then I'm like, well, then why are we here? Because the work happens outside of therapy. It doesn't happen. It can happen while we're together, but it really happens between sessions and you got to try stuff. So I really appreciated seeing all your strategies.
Yeah. The other thing is, when you're trying something new, it's new. So it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel weird. You're going to feel like you're doing it wrong. I think about when we both started meditation, it was so weird. I had to keep bringing my mind back because I'm thinking of all of the things I have to do. You have this calming music or I'm going to fall asleep, just all of the above. But I learned to start appreciating that time because it was time. Like we started probably 10, 15 minutes. And then now we can go longer because we allowed ourselves that time to be able to do that. For yoga, I was like, I can't hold myself up. Why am I going to do a downward dog, right? But after a while, you start to, appreciate some of those things. But it is uncomfortable in the beginning, and or something you're just not used to. So you make a good point of really just try something new. So I do appreciate all of your strategies. One of the things I wanted to ask you, just really quick about EQ, because you named your car came, EQ Kids Crew. So what is EQ, right? What is it? And
Oh
then
yeah.
how would you?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. EQ is your emotional quotient. So your IQ is your intelligence quotient, how smart you are, and your EQ is your emotions quotient, or it's called emotional intelligence, so you might see EI, but it's how well you understand emotions for yourself and for others. So it's, different philosophers or therapists, psychologists, um, have identified them in different ways, but generally it can be broken up between two categories. So focusing on yourself and then focusing on others. So um, self-awareness and self-management. So being able to identify the emotions in yourself and then manage the emotions in yourself. And then for others, uh, what is it called? Oh my goodness, sorry, my brain just totally blanked. But just being able to identify them in others and
Yeah.
understand what other people's emotions look like. And then responsible decision making is added as like a fifth one for some places. But really just being able to understand, like, how well are you able to understand emotions? That's what EQ
Oh,
means.
awesome. Thank you.
That makes sense because when you talked about how some people only have three emotions, happy, sad, or mad,
Mm-hmm.
well, I would imagine that person has a low EQ. And as they begin to
Mm-hmm.
develop more understanding of various emotions, that kind of builds um, their emotional quotient and
Mm-hmm.
helps them to just be better. I know with clients that struggle with being able to define their emotions, it's very tough for them to move through and understand where they are. But once they're able to
Mm-hmm.
go beyond, I'm frustrated. I can, I'm feeling sad today, or I'm feeling exhausted. Like when they can get beyond the simple ones and really get more descriptive, they can get to a better place because they have options in terms of how they're really feeling.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
very
it,
important.
it's no, I was just gonna say it's a really powerful thing when you can identify your emotions
Hmm.
physically and mentally. It just takes you to a completely different place in your life because you're so much more in control than you've ever been before. Um, I don't know. I'm glad to hear that people get to that point in your sessions. That's good.
Yes, and I know we're getting to the end of our hour, but I need to get back to this game really quick because I have a couple of other things. So, can you talk to us about this little guy? I haven't even taken it out of the pack. But these are all the
Yeah.
little characters, right? Because I really want parents to know how they can help their children in doing so, you're really helping yourself because this
Hmm.
is
Yes.
really though it looks like a kid's game, if you really start to take it seriously, you can definitely help to identify your own emotions and then talk about this because I really want people to know and have tools to help. I don't like to just kind of give, things without them seeing it. I want
Yeah.
you to just talk briefly about if I'm a parent and I have, or a school counselor, right? And I have these kids to come in, how can I help them with this? And then,
Absolutely. So, yes. So like I said, this was my pandemic work because I just knew that there was a need out there. So the card game, it has 48 of the emotions out of 130 that are on the feeling wheel. And I know we don't have the wheel right now, but that's okay. But it has 48 of those emotions. And with the cards, all of them have activities on the back so that kids can talk about how the emotion looks in different ways so they can feel it, talk about how it physically feels in their body, act it out doing some role playing, draw it using the journals, which I'll show you, and then talk it out, talking about a time that they felt that emotion. And so with being able to do even one of those things is really powerful for them to get a better understanding of themselves, different things that they've been through, different situations that may be bothering them but they don't know how to express that yet. So the wheel, it shows all of the characters. And I made this because I gave the card game to a woman who has a son with autism. And, they have a bigger spinning wheel because it's just a bigger set version of the game. But he carries it around the house and he calls it his clock. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love that so much. And she started off showing him the emotions with the wheel. So she was associating the colors with the characters, with their expressions. And he was understanding what those emotions were and was able to express himself and at least point, before he could start talking about them, he was able to point to how he was feeling. So I was like, oh my gosh, everybody has to have a wheel. So I made this little tiny spinning wheel. It has all the characters on it, and it's just a crew of kids that are multiracial, multicultural, diverse children that are teaching kids about these different emotions. So this one is Halima. She's teaching kids about feeling surprised. This one is Carlos. He's teaching kids about feeling bad, so like feeling tired or bored. This is Natalie, who's based off of my daughter and the books that I have. She's teaching kids about feeling fearful. This is Noah. He's teaching kids about feeling angry. This is Taylor. They're teaching kids about feeling disgusted. This is DJ. He's teaching kids about feeling sad. And this is Yuyan, and she's teaching kids about feeling happy. And so the kids can spin the wheel, and you can either talk about just the basics of this emotion. You can play it however you want. I made it very fluid, but there are also instructions if you want to go with those as well. But you can just spin the wheel and talk about the different emotions, reenact how they look, but you can pick up a card from that emotions deck and talk about that card and go through it, but it just randomizes the card basically. And then the journal, I created these journals because my daughter loves to write in all my notebooks, and she took all of my sticky notes and has used all of them up. So I made this so that kids can have their own safe space to write and draw. I have stickers that go with it. But they have their own space to write and draw and express themselves, that is just for them. And all of this fits, like I said, in the comfort bag, so they can have their own little EQ set, that they can take along with them wherever they go. But I know a lot of people that just use the journal because their kids, they aren't emotionally expressive out loud, but they are able to put it down, whether they're writing it out or they're drawing pictures in it, but they're able to express how they're feeling. And it's also a really good way to understand your kids better because kids often role play things that they've seen or heard, or they draw pictures based on things that they've seen or heard. And both of you, Carlos and Seneca, I'm sure that you've seen that, where kids are drawing pictures of people, they're either sad or they're angry, or they're using dark colors, or, just different things that hint at, oh, that looks like they might be going through something right now. And so it's just a really helpful way to gain a better understanding of your child and for them to understand themselves. And so I also have a little card on here that has different comfort and calming techniques, so self-regulation strategies on it. And I made it into one card because I have 100 of them with the larger version of the game. And it was just too overwhelming for people that are not, that are new to this. And so, kids can do jumping jacks or running in place as fast as they can, just different activities that they can do to practice self-regulation. So they can spin the wheel, learn about an emotion, and then practice a self-regulation strategy. And then on the other side, there are different scenarios where they can talk about, how they would feel in certain situations. So the first one is someone took your favorite toy. If, one kid might say they would be really mad about that. Another might say they'd be really, really sad about that. Another would be like, I don't really care. I'll just go play with something else, or having empathy and compassion for other people. So how would someone else feel if they were in that situation? So I tried to make this as clear as possible and give people as much as I could give without overwhelming and scaring people, because emotions can be hard and they can be scary, especially if you grew up feeling like they're scary, oh, I'm not allowed to feel. I shouldn't be feeling this. Yeah, you should. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. So don't, it's okay. So I have this card everybody gets. I have a whole bunch of stuff that people get with the game, but this card, it's important for grownups. It has a bunch of validating statements on the back. Like, I understand this is tough for you, and thank you for sharing that with me. Because when your kids open up to you, their biggest fear is that you're going to respond in a negative way, or they're gonna get punished for sharing something. So as we're going through the cards, my daughter has told me that I've made her feel one of the sad emotions with something that I did, and instead of me like, well, I didn't mean to do that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you would say that. How dare you? Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'll make sure not to do that again. Something like that. But just validating their feelings helps them to understand, because we always say, oh, you can come to me with anything, but we have to show them that we mean that. And that, what does that look like? You can't actually come to me with anything. And so when you validate their feelings in whatever situation they're in, that shows them over and over again, okay, they really mean that. So I'm going to bring them the big stuff. I'm going to come to them when I really need something, and not just with little things. So yeah, that's the gist of it.
That is
Thank you.
so cool. Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. That's like an amazing kid. I remember when Seneca showed me when she received this, the things that were a part of the kit. Thought that was really cool, and I wanted to make sure I had it set for my clients. So, if you are a therapist online, if you are a teacher, a school counselor, make sure to visit www.sonocomlab.com. That's SONOCOMLAB.com, so you can check out those items online and see what's available. But definitely a great tool, great thing to have for students. This has been a great conversation tonight. Chelsea, we really appreciate all the information you shared today. It runs right in line with what I do in therapy, and that's why I want to use these tools with my kids. So we appreciate it. Who else do we need to thank, babe?
So we need to thank Doctors and Dr. Wise, of course, for just making mental health a priority. We really appreciate the opportunity to have these conversations. And then, of course, Reverend Salon Wise, who is in the background. Thank you so much for all that you do all the time with the technology and everything. So thank you.
Wonderful. And we'll be back next month for another episode of Thursday Therapy. We'll see you next month in the month of May. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Thank you.